people, I thought we could get a little more info on the apples from my story post earlier. So I thought I would show you a couple of things because there's been some good examples. This standard UK apple pack looks really good, actually. Anyone who is in the UK can find some of these. These are so easy to find. And at the moment, there's tons of them all around. They're all from the UK, and they will be from the UK until around about probably July, maybe into August a little bit. What happens with the apples is they take them, they put them in fridges that are very, very cold, and the apple quality doesn't really diminish throughout the entire year. They can keep them for most of the year, and the quality now will still be really high. But I want to show you a couple of things. This one is the apple that I used for the example I posted a little bit earlier. And this, for anyone that wants to know, this is my top tips as a 5-year fruitarian on how to pick a good quality Jazz apple. We're talking about Jazz apples here, right? And a Jazz apple, I find, is one of the best varieties that is available all around in kind of the Europe regions, in the UK especially. The UK is pretty good with apples, and apples tend to be my most reliable fruit variety. So if I was going to pick any variety of fruit, any type of fruit to kind of live off of, mostly, and I wanted to make sure that, like, basically most of what I was spending would be good quality, a Jazz apple is, you can't really go wrong with a Jazz apple. A Jazz apple, generally, if you follow these tips, you will find they're good quality, they digest really well, they're hydrating, they're not too acidic, there's a good balance for them, and they're good for your lymph system as well. They'll hit your lymph system and keep things moving quite well. But this was the example apple. And the reason I picked this was because it was a good example of what a really good Jazz apple looks like. It's not the perfect example, but it's still a really, really good example. One of the things that I spoke about there, I think the number one tip was you want that deep red color. So if you look at it right here, you can see it's a deep red, but it's not too dark. It's just vibrant, right? I'll show you that. There's a lot of vibrancy to that. And generally, this is a good rule when picking good quality fruits in general. You want like a dynamic contrast. Imagine you're looking at a TV and the TV is like really, really high quality and there's super dynamic like contrast between the colors. That's what you're looking for in fruits. You don't want fruits to look dull. If fruits look dull, or there's not much of a contrast between the colors on the fruits, it's low quality. You don't want to eat that. It's not going to taste very good. It's going to be picked underripe most likely. And I've got some examples of that kind of here, actually, which I'll show you a little bit later. But this, very deep red. Not too dark, but quite dynamic. And you want it on a blush that's white, orange, or yellow, but not green. The white blush and the yellow blush and the orange blush, they're all going to taste a little bit different. And it means that they've kind of been picked at a certain like earliness, but they're all really good tasting. Jazz apples, by the way, really crunchy. They don't tend to go mealy like some of the other varieties. Mealy varieties is bad. What happens with the mealy varieties is the water inside the cells of the apple don't really snap properly, and you don't get the hydration that you really require, and your body finds it harder to digest. You want stuff that is crunchy with an apple. You don't want this mealy, sandy taste. Anytime you get a mealy, sandy taste, it means it's low quality, it hasn't been stored correctly, and generally it's just a poor quality apple. On certain varieties you have issues with it, but the Jazz apple is almost perfect in regards to this. You really need the Jazz apple to have been left out of a fridge for a long, long time before it starts to go a bit mealy. And even then, it doesn't deteriorate in quality too badly unless it's been left out forever and ever and ever and ever. So, red with like a yellow blush. You don't want it too dark red, and you don't want it green. Green is bad. You also don't want paleness, right? So the contrast is what you're really looking for. You don't want it to be pale around the whole apple, right? So if you've got like a pale pink, that's a bad quality apple. And I'm going to show you some other examples here, because we've got some other apples that aren't as good. That's a really good apple. This is another one that's really good. You can see it's got a little bit of that white yellow blush on it, and down at the bottom it's orange. Sometimes down at the bottom you get these kind of greeny colors. That can suggest it's been picked too early, but you can see this is kind of a good kind of orange. It's not green, so that will be a good quality apple as well. And it's not super dark, right? So the super dark ones tend to have been picked a little bit too early, and they won't be as sweet, and they're generally not as good. They're not as well digesting. Sometimes they can be really sour as well, but they're still generally good quality apples, generally, right? But down here, you can see that this one isn't green, right? So that's another good apple. Good apple. Now to show you another one, that's an example of one that's maybe not as good. A lot of these are really quite good, so I haven't got the best examples here to show you a bad quality apple, so I don't buy any bad quality apples, but this you can see, I mean there's still a little bit of red on there, so it's pretty good. But if the apple is this color, this kind of pale pink color with not too much contrast across the entire apple, you can tell it's just not going to be very ripe. It's not going to be very tasty. There's not going to be much like dynamic. There's not going to be high acids and high sugars to kind of balance it out. It's just not going to be quite as good. If we compare them, right, so this is the first apple I showed you, and that's the second apple. Look at the difference, right? You can see dynamically this one's way more dynamic, whereas if you compare it to this, like that's just pale, man. That's not great. If you look at the bottom, I mean that one's probably picked at a decent time, but I mean that one doesn't even have that at the bottom. Do you see what I'm saying? But that's quite a big difference there. So this one's not going to be as tasty. And generally, you want to avoid green. So if the apple's like super green the whole way around, or if there's any big green patches that aren't yellow or orange, they're going to be bad. And different retailers are going to be different at the way that they package and look after them. So for example, I noticed for those of you in the UK, M&S tends to have the freshest apples, but they can be picked slightly early in comparison to something like Waitrose. If you look at Jazz apples in Waitrose, they tend to be picked a little bit later, so they won't be as crunchy and they won't be as sharp, but they tend to be good quality as well. But every now and then you'll get one that is a little bit mealy. Those are two great places to get Jazz apples in the UK. But I think that pretty much rounds it off for just my tips on picking apples. Jazz apples are really simple once you understand what not to look for. They can be a complete mystery when you start out, when you're looking at all these different apple colors and you pick a like really deep red one and then you bite into it and you're like, that's not very good. Apples can be really confusing, Jazz apples specifically. The bi-colored apples specifically, they can be really confusing. But these Jazz apple tips, they do translate to other bi-colored apple variety tips as well. But then if you're looking at like red varieties, like Red Delicious, you're looking for stuff that's completely different. Might do another video on those at one point. And if you're looking for green or yellow varieties, those are completely different as well. But the bi-colored ones, you really want that dynamic contrast. And that goes for all fruits as well. So any bi-colored fruit, generally, you're looking for deep contrast. I think that's basically it. I'll show you a couple more apple varieties because we got them out here. This is a good example. That's got that deep redness to it, but you can see it's not going to be as nice as this one, which has way more contrast to it. You find sometimes the, like, I don't know what they call this, like marbling, like the texture, that can be like an indicator of an apple that's been left on for a long amount of time, so that can be good as well. But really what you're looking for is the deep colors to it. Like this one's going to be banging. What else do we got? This one's an example of one that's maybe not so good as well. Like this one, you can see that's closer to green than say that color. You can just see it's slightly greener. This is way more like pale and white, whereas that's starting to get close to green, especially down here. Right, if we compare that to the other one I showed you, you see how that's way more orange and that's way more green. Like this won't be as good. This is going to be a little more sour. And you can see that it's pale most of the way around. There is a little bit of contrast. This one will still probably be pretty good, but I wouldn't want to eat like a whole meal of these ones. These ones won't be very good. So that's what I'd say for apples. You're looking more for like this rather than that. It's obvious when you look at them like that. And enjoy the apples, guys. I would say if you haven't tried a good Jazz apple, you definitely want to look into that, because a good Jazz apple is so nice. And if you juice them up as well, Jazz apple juice is incredible. Sometimes I make it with a little bit of lemon, just a tiny bit of lemon, or maybe more than a tiny bit of lemon, maybe 5. Yeah, what was it? I was doing 5 Jazz apples, around this size Jazz apple, normal size Jazz apple, to about half of a juiced lemon. And if you mix it up like that, you get a really delicious Jazz apple lemonade. Enjoy the apples, guys. Hell yeah.